tried to call. Did you get my call? Ah, okay. All right, everybody, behave.
I do not edit most videos I record, just so you know.
No, no, it's fine. Okay. I'd say let's go ahead and start, Rabbi.
Okay,
Welcome, Rabbi Charnes. Thank you for being here.
wonderful to be with you all. And it looks like we have a at least one new person that I'm recognizing the name of. Maybe for just this time, we would, aha, there you go. Maybe for just, I just want you to know our last time together when we did that introduction, I know it went for about an hour, but it was wonderful learning about you, just finding out who is on the other side of the screen, not just as far as a face, but as a human being. Maybe for just 3 or 4 minutes, we could just say a quick hello to each other to remind us who we are. And if we have a new face or two, we'd learn about you also, if everybody's comfortable with that. If you just want to say ditto from last time, fine. But is everybody okay with that? Thumbs up. Okay, well, I'll just look at my screen and we'll start with Leona's iPad.
Uh,
Just a quick hello
John,
and how's everything?
we're
Sorry?
fine. I guess we did our story last time. And for new people, we are from Albuquerque and love to join you for the Shabbats. And there's really nothing new. John, do you have something new?
No, I enjoyed the last session, so I'm looking forward to this one.
Thank you. And if there's anything that is going on in life, this is a Torah study, but study alone is never the intention or the ultimate goal. The goal is to connect with each other, to connect with ourselves. And if something is happening in life and you need to just bare your soul, so to speak, we can at least be here for you, and we can continue after privately if you need to talk more. So if there's something in life that you just want to share, also please feel free. Brother Christo.
Well, I don't know about brother. You'd probably rather have me as your distant cousin, not your brother. But thank you. I'm Christo Cheney. I live in Lubbock and been kind of obsessed with translations, knowing that every single translation is wrong, including the one I'm working on. So maybe I should just. I did find one Tanakh that no Jew can really disagree on whether it's right or wrong, the original.
Okay,
Yeah.
beautiful. All right, John.
Hey, I'm John Melman. I'm in Colorado Springs. I didn't get to meet you last week. That's some last month, I guess, or
Hmm?
last time. Um, so I know some of the people, but don't know everyone real well. I will share that I'm scattering my wife's ashes next week, and it's good, and I'm prepared for it, and I'm going to Taos, Mexico.
Okay, I'm sorry. And just for the record, I'm in Colorado. We're in Colorado also, near Denver, in in the Highlands Ranch, Littleton area. So we can certainly connect afterwards if you'd like to talk, and if you'd ever like to join us for certain Sabbaths when we come down there. Looks like Yael is next.
Hi there, everyone. Good morning and Shabbat Shalom. My name is Yael. I am Joe and Sarah's daughter. And first, I would just like to say it is so wonderful to have my dear friend Chessa joining us today. She is an incredible person, and I really am so delighted that she's here. I don't really have anything new to add. I just graduated high school and am enjoying that time off and time of connection. And I'm
Beautiful,
excited for the study.
beautiful. Thank you. Michael, you're next on my list.
Oh, well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Good Shabbos. I too am from Lubbock. I'm 21 miles northeast of this guy in the great outdoors of Lubbock County. And I am the treasurer of Temple Aaron.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Sherry, you be up next on my picture screen.
Um, okay. I'm not sure what else to say that people haven't heard before, but I'm really glad you're all here. Welcome, Shessa, for the first time. Um, let's see. This week I brought my youngest daughter to college, so that was
Oh,
a big event in my life. It's so anyway, that's it.
okay. All right. Thank you. Sarah?
Okay. All this time I thought I was on mute. Sorry. So like,
No,
yeah.
and everything will be used against you. Don't worry. We heard it all.
Hi everyone. I'm Sarah Schechter. I am Joe's wife, Yael's mom, and Chessa's friend.
Yeah.
And just really a pleasure to be with you on this Shabbat morning. And I am thinking about where I was a week ago today with Chessa's family. Very special day. So just wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and looking forward to a beautiful study, to some beautiful insights from our religion and to having a sense of Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat peace. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Let's see. Kim Grant, it says
Yes,
on the screen.
Shabbat Shalom, Boker Tov. I'm Kim Grant. I'm a Temple Aaron board member, and I live up in Denver.
Oh, great.
I missed you last month, so I look forward to participating today. Thank you.
Thank you. I won't say brother, I'll say cousin because our initials are so close. AC, but you are my brother.
Rabbi, good shouts, everybody. I'm down here in Trinidad, and I'm glad to say that I've gotten to know Temple Aaron, the Temple Aaron community, the board, and if you come down for a visit, I'd be glad to show you around and extend an invite to everybody to come for Rosh Hashanah services that we'll be having here and more beyond, hopefully. So thanks to Kim, who helped me get connected, and Sherry and Neil and all the board members, and good to be here with you all.
Great, thank you. Well, Chessa, you're next on my screen. How are you?
Whoa. Hi, I'm Chessa. I'm friends with Yael. And my dad passed away 3-ish weeks ago, and his service was a week ago. And I'm here to learn. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. And I hope we'll connect more after, but I hope today brings just some beginning, healing, grounding, because this is not a walk that any of us wants to go through or on, and we all do. But we're here, and we're grateful you're here with us. So thank you. Ron Rubin.
Hi, Shabbat Shalom. I got in 3 minutes late. What was your question, Rabbi, that we're supposed to address?
Oh, your social security number, your bank account, and your credit card number.
My social
Just how are
security
you and who
number
are you?
is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. My birthday is I'm on the board. I'm secretary. I grew up in Raton in Trinidad, and so I have a long history with Temple Aaron. 2 days ago was my wife's and my 48th wedding anniversary, and we celebrated it nicely last night. And on September 2nd, we're going to Israel to visit my son, his wife, and our 8 grandchildren for 3 weeks.
Wow.
So in 1 week, we'll be in the air flying from Denver to London and then London to Tel Aviv. And we have some concerns, but we're so excited. We haven't been there in about 2.5 years.
Wow. Well, Mazel Tov on everything. And I hope you get another 48.
Thank you.
Let's see. Oh boy, the organization has just changed on my screen. Let's see. Chuck and Nancy, I guess we haven't done. If you want to share any thoughts, who you are, how you are. All right, we'll come back to you, Chuck and Nancy, when you're ready. And Neil, do you want to just say a quick hello?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
All right, guys. Sorry, I'm not sitting there. I've been watching, I've been listening, but I also finished taking a shower. So I just got a text and a call that there's some big donors down in Trinidad. Although I was in Trinidad Monday through Wednesday this week. I'm getting ready to pack my bags and spend overnight and go down there and meet with them because they want to meet today and tomorrow. So hopefully they'll be good to the temple. So as a president, kind of feels the job is never done, but it's fun. Never done, but actually fun. So
you sure you don't want to share some of your shower glory with us?
You know, I probably shared too much already. No, relax.
All right. Well, good luck with everything. That's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
All right.
Appreciate it. I'll be on the road and before long.
All right.
Thank you.
And Job or Job?
Job, like in the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Bible. Thank you. I was here last time. I think the last time we just introduced ourselves, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I did introduce myself. I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm an Indian Christian, a Thomas Christian. We've been Christians for as far back as we can trace, with some distant Jewish ancestry. So I'm here to learn about Judaism and also just to connect with folks of a different faith, but related faith.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Welcome. And thank you. And Yashim.
Yes, I'm here. Just one second. I'm right here. Glad to see you all. And I was looking forward to this morning. And it always grounds me and makes me feel more hopeful to do this Torah study. So I'm just grateful that we can do it again. I'm looking forward to it.
Right. Thank you. And hello to your husband too.
He's right here, of course, in hiding. But see.
Good morning.
We see you. We see you.
I should be the one hiding, but it's
all right. So it looks like we got everybody, unless there's anybody I didn't get. I guess I'm the only one who hasn't. I'm Joe, and I'm going to put myself on mute to save you any further grief. So we will begin. Thank you for this just introduction time, because the introductory time to allow us just to connect as a community and not just as a study group. So before we begin studies, as we always do, we have in the Jewish tradition a blessing, and it's a longer blessing than we say here, but it's a much longer blessing. But we say a blessing over the Torah, over our sacred texts before we begin studying them. We don't just open up the text and open our hearts and begin studying. We actually begin with a blessing. So for those who know the blessing, we can all say it together, not to worry. And again, we're only going to do the first line. We're not going to do all of the other portions of it. So all together in perfect harmony, because this is our audition to become members of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. So sing well, folks. We're going on stage. Ready? Baruch atah
Adonai
Eloheinu
Eloheinu
melech
melech
haolam
haolam
Asher
Asher
Kiddushanu
Kiddushanu
B'mitzvotav
B'mitzvotav
V'tzivanu
V'tzivanu
La'asok
La'asok B'divrei
B'divrei
Torah.
Torah. So last time we discussed a little bit of the blessing, if you remember. We discussed that there are two versions actually. And let's see here. What I wanted you to do last time, and again, we're not going to stay long on this, but just to get us in the sense of blessing, to get a sense of blessing. We said, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commanded us concerning, or to engage, sorry, that's the other version, to engage in words of Torah." That's the version we said, but the other version is simply not to engage, but just concerning words of Torah, concerning holy words. And I wanted you to reflect on why do we have two different blessings, one of which seems so almost, I don't want to say heavy and light, but deep and simple. Just are we making a blessing over words of Torah, or is it about this opportunity and beautiful privilege to engage with sacred wisdom? You would think la'asok should be our focus rather than just al divrei, over words of Torah. Did anybody have any thoughts? And it's not a problem if you didn't. We'll move forward. Does anybody have any thought before we begin studying or engaging? Did you think about why we have two blessings that seem to be so distinct in how we approach Torah? It's just over the words or to engage with the words. And which one draws you more? Okay.
What is
Then
the other one? What are
the other one was simply who sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us over the words of Torah. Al divrei Torah, over concerning. That seems not to be as deeply engaging as to engage with words of Torah, right? So that was the question, and I said I'd let you let that ferment in your minds for a little while. And if nothing is fermented, we can ferment until next time. But I will leave you with this. I used to think that the words la'asok, to engage with these holy words of Torah, of our instruction, our sacred text, to engage seemed to be on the face of it much more profound, and that's what we should be doing. But this later blessing, and again, that's in the Talmud, this later blessing is about, from the first time we see it is in the Seder Rav Amram Gaon. So it's several hundred years later. But it's simply over words of Torah. And I will tell you, I say both. Don't get me wrong. I go back and forth. But I am much more drawn to those simple words of commanded us concerning or over words of Torah, over words of holy instruction. That has, over the years, begun to draw me much more than the more obvious to engage with, to wrestle with these words of Torah. Yes, John.
Stop me from slowing you down with too many questions. Is la'asot the same word as say? Is it to make or do? Is that the same as
no? That's a good question. I probably am not. It might not be coming through. No, it's a completely different root. It's la'asok versus osei. The one is to do, but it's not the same root at all. The other is to engage with rather than simple doing or making. A good question. Yes. It has to do with business, engaging in more modern Hebrew. So I'll leave it at that I am much more drawn to those simple words, even though they're both obviously equally profound. But I have become much more drawn to those simple words of over, concerning words of Torah. And we'll pick that up next time then. And then we discussed, you remember how many words there were in the blessing? that we said? Well, there were 13. And I asked, is there anything in the Jewish world that reminds you of the number 13? And we went, I know we discussed a few, and we'll discuss a few more, because these blessings are intentional. They're there not just to simply say, but they're actually much more profound meditations that are there to lead us into a deeper connection with sacred study, with Torah study. Torah meaning instruction. That's one of its meanings, to be instructed by holy wisdom. So what does the number 13 signify? Yes, Yael.
First, I'm not sure if everyone sees this, but I think that you want to push the computer back a little bit just because it's shaking
Oh,
slightly.
for me. Oh, I'm sorry. Got
Yes.
it. I'll keep my
No,
legs
I'm
away from
sorry.
these. No, thank you. Thank you.
And then the second for the third, and first, the thought on the over.
Yeah.
I mentioned this to you and we never really had the opportunity to discuss it, but it's because it's concerning words, right, over the words of Torah
Mm-hmm.
or on them.
Yeah, on about
And
it's
the
a rich
only
word,
thought that
yes.
came, right. And the only thought that came to mind for me, and again, he could have said this, but maybe it was just leaving that room for opportunities because we say it on the words or over the words, but it's up to us to let the words in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then for the 13 attributes of God. Oh.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something on the 13. Oh, the
No,
13
no, no. You
attributes
said,
from
what does
Exodus.
13
I'm sorry.
signify?
Yes. Perfect. The 13 attributes in Exodus 34. Right. So do you think it's Exodus? That's one of the most significant passages in the entire Hebrew Bible, the entire Hebrew tradition, biblical and rabbinic. It's describing the essence and the nature of the source of all of existence, of the divine, of the holy. And it just so happens that both versions of the blessing have 13 words, and it's the 13 attributes of mercy. So there is something very, very profound. I'm trying not to just spoon feed, but there is something so, first of all, it's not accidental. Again, rabbis are very, very focused on numbers, and they highlight certain aspects of prayers with the numbers. Numbers are central to Jewish thought. It's not just simply, it's 13 verses 15. There is something deep in that number, that if you don't understand Jewish gematria, you're going to miss a lot of the beauty of whatever that number supposedly represents. But have you ever heard? I'll leave you with this. And again, I'm going to offer it and then we'll discuss them all next time more, each one. You ever hear of the 13 petaled rose? Does that ring a bell to anybody? Okay, that's a mystical concept. And so remember, when we're saying these blessings over Torah, whichever one you say, this number 13 is meant to remind us and echo. It's an echo in our background of our tradition and hopefully within our hearts, that it's meant to draw us into the symbolism of 13 somehow, some way. And maybe we will focus. This is just our introduction, getting to know each other. I want to give you these hints, these potential paths to walk down so that you can experience where these holy words are meant to take us. So with that as a background, we've done the blessing, and we have some sense that these words are actually much richer than simply words to say over our study. They're meant to lead us into a much deeper engagement with the holy, with what is ultimately enduring within. Let's look at one more text. One more text. If you could, Sherry, let's go to the Mishnah of Pirkei Avot, because this is going to tell us how, one way, to study. It's going to give us an insight, at least in the Jewish mind, how we study. So the numbers of the so the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. So click that and let's see where we end up. Okay, so let me see here. So keep going.
I think it's
Next
in the
one.
third division after Nashim, or fourth one.
Keep going. No, it's in the fourth, but keep
Yes, sir.
going.
There it is.
Right there it is, Pirkei Avos, and go to chapter 5. And here we're going to see, I don't know the number because different numbering systems exist. It's either start off with 526, because in some versions it's the last Mishnah, the last of our legal, it's the last chapter of this book, which is a legal text that also has great spiritual wisdom. It's a unique legal text. So let me see. No, keep going. So it's okay. So you know what? Hold on, wait. 5, 5, 20. So it's completely different here. Let me see. Go up. 520. So it might be 520. Yeah, 522 in this one. In some it's 521, in some it's 526. So Christo, would you read from Ben Bagbag in the text 522?
I see it. Ben Bog said, "Turn it over, and again turn it over, for all is therein, and look into it. Become gray and old therein, and do not move away from it, for you have no better portion than it."
Okay. Yeah, leave it right there, por favor.
Translation by Dr. Joshua Culp.
Oh, okay. We will analyze this because I will bring this up regularly. As far as we said the blessing over Torah before we begin to study our sacred text. And now this is giving us a way, an approach of sacred study in general. I think this is a very universal teaching. But it's teaching us when it says, hafoch ba, v'hafoch ba. This idea of turning over and turning over. The language is doubled because Torah study is meant to be something deeply engaged with. All sacred study, not just Torah, but we're talking about Torah here. My hope is that as we go through our sacred time together in our text, that we are turning this over to find what is deeper beneath it. And it's not just one time. Notice the language is doubled. Hafoch ba, v'hafoch ba. When the rabbis double, they're telling you there is something to do again and again and again. It's not simply twice and you've got it. But turning it over, because there is something deeply, it says there, for everything is within it. But only if we are turning it over and engaging with it and allowing it ultimately to turn us into something more beautiful, more graceful, more loving, more honoring, and more respectful. So this idea of turning over the texts is ultimately there to turn over who we are, to turn us into something else. So that is how I always want us to understand, at least how I go through sacred study, whether it's in Torah or in other sacred wisdom traditions. It's something we have to engage with, to wrestle with, and to encounter deeply, over and over again, because it will transform us, which is the ultimate goal. Okay, wonderful, beautiful. If we could go now, Sherry, we're going to begin turning over. Could you go back to the main screen of Sefaria and go to Tanakh, which is just what we call the Hebrew Bible, and go to let's see, where do we want to start here? Let me get this out of the way. We will start, we're in a time period right now in general, it's the 10 weeks. It's the 10 weeks. And what that means, I'm just getting to the section that I want to begin with. What that means in Judaism, this 10-week period that we're in, it's actually divided into 3 and 7. And everything changes here as far as our prophetic readings that accompany the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. Normally, the prophetic readings thematically relate to whatever our weekly or lectionary section was from the Torah, the books of Moses. Now, for the next 10 weeks, everything relates to the time period that we are in. And it's broken down into 3 weeks and 7 weeks, beginning with the breaching of the walls of the temple back in the Babylonian times, and ultimately culminating in what is called Rosh Hashanah, the new year, the new beginning. So it goes from the beginning of destruction to the beginning of renewal, and it's a 10-week period. We just finished with the 3 weeks, and we are now in this rebuilding period of 7. And again, the number 3, the number 7, and the number 10, these are intentional numbers. These are critical numbers to be aware of. So we've just finished, again, those 3 weeks where life in the Jewish world, the sacred center of the Jewish world, the core of our existence, was destroyed. And that manifests itself by the destruction of the temple. Our sacred center was destroyed. That happened just a couple of weeks ago. And then we begin reading this other series of texts from the prophets, all of which are Isaiah now. And it's a prophetic section that all deals with rebuilding. And what I want to just begin the discussion with as we go through these weeks together, don't just think of this as a reflection on the history of the destruction of a sacred center and somehow they rebuilt. The way the rabbis work with this, at least some rabbis, specifically this rabbi, but many, is that's a real event in the past, the destruction, as is the rebuilding. But we also have to remember that the rabbis teach us that these events are always a sign for us. The events and the actions of our ancestors are there to guide us in life as we walk through life. So the destruction of the past is also, in some way, for us, to help us. And the rebuilding of the past is also there, and it's instructive for us how we can rebuild our own lives. And so I want to make this very intimate and ask us to think as we go into the text briefly, just 1 or 2 prophetic readings. What has happened in your life? You can share or you can just take it within. What has happened in your life or over the course of your life where it just seems to have broken down? The walls were breached, just like in the temple times. The walls of your heart were breached. Something within was destroyed, was beaten down, was broken. Something holy and beautiful and beloved was lost. And where am I now? Where am I now? How can I rebuild? That's what the first 3 weeks were, but that's what I want us to take with us. To ask us, where am I broken? Where am I without a sacred center to guide me, to connect me, to allow me to root and blossom into something greater? I need help because I am broken. These 3 weeks of the past, these were the metaphoric 3 weeks of my the last 3 weeks of my life that I experienced. What is happening here? And how can I begin rebuilding? So is there anybody who wants to simply offer something broken within before I begin reading just a couple of verses to guide us? Again, this isn't the focus of our entire study, but I can't begin our Torah study without reminding us where we are in the overall cycle of Jewish life and Jewish thought. Is there anybody who wants to offer just a brief thought on something that has broken down, that has caused them in life to lose hope, to lose light, to lose meaning, to lose faith? If not, I'll simply begin reading of how do we begin to rebuild, because ultimately we need a way back. So I can't see most of you on the screen, but just anybody who wants, is there anything you want to offer before we begin the rebuilding to let us know what has broken down? Okay, then let's turn to last week's of Torah reading. It'll be from Isaiah 40, verse 1. because this is the beginning. When we have something that we are broken by, how do we begin to move forward? I have reached rock bottom and I am lost. What do I do? How do I move forward? This is how I read these texts. The first words there in the Hebrew, and this is the melody we sing it. Nachamu, nachamu, ami, yamar, elechem. Comfort, comfort my people. That's a pause. In the Hebrew, there's a marker that says stop. When you see a person, or you see in yourself brokenness, loss, seek comfort. Or in our case, if we see another person, we are there. It's a command form. Comfort, comfort my people. We are there to give comfort, to help find ways to bring comfort to those who are without comfort, to those who are without hope. This isn't a recommendation. The Hebrew is a command. Yes, I know contextually it's talking 2,700 years ago, roughly 2,600 years ago. But in our own lives, it's always relevant. We take these ancient texts and make them relevant for us. We need comfort, and we need to comfort because we are lost and broken. So comfort, comfort my people. This is what God says. And the question is, how do I even begin to comfort or receive comfort? The next two words are so beautiful. It's technically three, but there's a little joining word between two of them. So it's two words, but it's three. So it says, Dabru, speak. Alev Yerushalayim. Speak. It says tenderly there, but literally it says speak on or to. This word can mean on, but sometimes to. Speak to the heart here of Jerusalem. Well, we're not back in that time. And now I'm speaking to another human being. The words speak to the heart. Speak over the heart. When you're with another person or people who are hurting, the first thing we have to do, first of all, is be present. The second thing is we have to speak with them to their heart. Speak over their heart, to their heart. Whether in words or just with presence of heart. We have to come from a place of heart to heal the brokenhearted. These texts, and again, we're not going to go through all the verses. That's the beginning. That's the beginning of our calling when we see brokenness in the world, brokenness in a human. And if we're experiencing brokenness, then we have to be able to have those around us speaking to our hearts to help rebuild. It's not just about ancient structures. It's about living human beings who are broken down and hurting. And what can we do? What can we sing? You notice I sing it. For those who don't know, we never just say these words. Every word has melody over it, a melody marker. So we sing them. So my prayer for us when we are seeing people who are hurting is that we not just speak to them, but we speak to them with song, with a song of comfort, comforting words to their heart. And hopefully they will do that for us when we are broken. It's a beautiful verse. That's from last week. That's the beginning of rebuilding, even in our brokenness. We're still broken, but at least there's some little glimmer of hope and comfort and consolation that is being restored. And I'm so grateful, whoever that person is, that is bringing back hope, potentially, to my life. Where we are this week, it's from Isaiah 49. If you could, Sherry, Isaiah 49, verse 14. So 49, verse 14. This is often what, let's see, so go to Tanakh, and then you'll go, or I can just read it either way, but Isaiah 49, I can just read it. It says, and Zion said, the Lord has forsaken me. I'm just going to stop right there. What often happens, this is walking us through the model of rebuilding our lives when they are broken, when we are lost, when we are hurting. It says, then Zion said, metaphorically, after Zion, Jerusalem is receiving comfort. What happens? Zion says, Azovani Adonai. The Lord has abandoned me. The Lord, Adonai Shechechani. The Lord has forgotten me. When we are hurting, when we are lost, and we're receiving comfort, it's not just that lives are rebuilt. What happens here is in the midst of the comfort that is being offered, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, the comfort that is coming to my heart. The language here of Isaiah 49, in metaphorically from Zion, says, the Lord has abandoned me. The Lord has forgotten me. I can't even feel the beginning of restoration. I still feel deeply abandoned, deeply forgotten, deeply lost, even in the midst of the surrounding comfort that is being offered. This is part of the grieving process when we are suffering, when we are hurting. Comfort isn't like a light switch and it just transforms the broken heart or heals the broken heart or brings back light. We receive comfort in our hearts and then we feel lost, abandoned, and forgotten. And our job is, again, if we were going to go through all the different selections of the prophets, to continue offering the comfort to the heart to help the person who was still in exile, who was still broken, who was still forgotten, and who was still lost. How? That's what we go through each week's reading, meditating on. But I just wanted you to get a sense that before we begin to study, this is turning it over, uncovering it so that it allows us to uncover deeper dimensions of what we have within that we can offer to each other, because we're all hurting and we are in this period of rebuilding, and it's not just theoretical. We are here to help rebuild our world, and it begins with each one of us helping somebody else whose life is broken. That will rebuild the world a lot more than anything else. The person in front of you who is broken is who we have to bring comfort to, because they feel forgotten, lost, and abandoned, or just hurting and broken because of life. What can we bring? That's that 7-week period that we are in right now to rebuild our own lives, each other's lives, and somehow the world. I don't know how, but somehow the world. So that's by the time period that we're in. That's how we're going to go into our Torah reading. That's the Haftorah, the prophets. That's the approach. That's why we say a blessing over Torah, because we're studying something so beautiful and rich. Before we go into the actual Torah to continue this theme, how can we and why don't we? Are there any thoughts, comments, reflections, meditations that you want to share before we can get rid of that screen for right now, Sherry, so I can see your beautiful faces? But does anybody have, is this relevant? Yes, it's relevant to all our lives. But does anybody want to take us just more intimately into the conceptual framework that I've just offered us for how we can live with life during our brokenness, during others' brokenness, and how we can begin to rebuild each other's lives? Anything, yay, nay, or we'll just reflect on that for this week? Yes,
It's
Yashim.
not
Is it Yeshim or
Yeshim,
Yashim?
Yeshim. It's not really
Yeshim.
a comment on what you were asking, but it occurred to me that, in Christianity, I hear people saying, turn it over to God, turn it over to God, which is like a surrender. Whereas in Judaism, turning it over is really a deeper intellectual and spiritual, engagement. So I don't know if did I understand this sort of Yeah, I don't know if I saw it correctly, but it sort of is interesting to me
Well,
that one is
I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
go no no go you go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say the turning it over. I will tell you as a student, not a practitioner, but as a student of Christianity, uh, this Christianity doesn't just turn it over to God. The language here in our Mishnah of turning it over is specifically speaking about how we are to approach the sacred text. Christians also wrestle with the holy, and Christians also don't simply, I will say this absolutely, not with any condition. They turn it over to God, as we all do on some level. But Christianity also speaks of bearing one another's burdens and serving one another and loving one another. Okay, so it's not just turning it over to God. It is there. It is there. And it says, in fact, I just taught on this on another podcast. But again, the New Testament isn't my text, but it's a beautiful tradition of wisdom. And in Galatians chapter 5, there, specifically, it's speaking of how do you know if a person is overflowing with spirit? In their language, the fruits of the spirit. It says, because the first fruit of the spirit is love. So that's not turning it over to God. That's being turned over by God, touched by God. How do I know? Because you are serving one another in love. This is all Paul's language, beautiful language. And he speaks also of bearing one another's burdens. Okay? So Christianity doesn't just turn it over. We might turn over our texts in study differently because we're different, but we're all turning it over. And ultimately, yes, we turn something over, ultimate existence, to God, but not only to God. We have to be here also in that process. And I think that's true for all faiths. But thank you. Thank you. Anybody else before we go into our Torah text for a few moments? Yes, John.
If I understand, can you hear me?
Yes.
Reaching out to somebody, that's level one. That's often hard to do if you don't know if the reaching out is welcome, or how to do it, and actually helping them. Like that probably takes a lot of wisdom, I think.
Yes, and I believe we have that. I believe we have that because we all have hearts. We all have hearts. It's the wisdom of the heart. Service of the heart is the term rabbis use for prayer. Service of the heart. But hopefully that heart of service, or that service of the heart in prayer, leads us into greater service in life. So we know, but we somehow don't, and that's what we're going to develop. One reason why we don't, and hopefully how we can possibly a little more. So you're right on, John. You're right on. We often don't, and we don't know how, so we think, but we do know how. We just don't.
We have wisdom, but we don't know that we have wisdom.
Yes.
That's like the Cowardly Lion and the Wizard of Oz.
Okay, beautiful. Anybody else before we go into yes, Christo.
In Mishkan Tefillah and my shul's Old Gates of Prayer Siddurim, I would always insert something before the Amidah. It says, pray as if everything depended on God, but act as if everything depends on you. Who rises from prayer better persons? Their prayer has already been answered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would always insert that every time right before the Amidah to give them something to think about before I ask them to give their personal prayers to God in secret, silently, before we continue the service.
Yes. Yes. No, it's a beautiful Jewish meditation. That's different prayer books have different meditations before the prayers, but that's a beautiful one. Thank you. All right. AC, anything, or we'll just go into the Torah text? Okay, let's go into why. Now we're going to focus on the Parsha, which is in Deuteronomy, the fifth book of the Hebrew Bible. And let's start off with it begins with Parshas Akev, which is it's the third one. If you go to Deuteronomy, no. Oh boy. No, let's go to Sepharia, Deuteronomy. There you are, Tanakh, and then click Deuteronomy. And then we will go to 7. And we will start with, I'm just going to focus on one aspect of this. Let's start off at the Parsha begins at verse 12. So if we can go down to verse 12. All right. Right there. All right. Let's see. How do they do this in English? Oh boy. Well, so we will read this. Let me see. Sarah, do you want to, or somebody, I can't see all the faces anymore, but does somebody, let's not read this one because, and if you obey these rules, it's missing something central. It's missing something central. Does anybody have something different on the first few words there as, and if you obey? Obey is fine, and if you do obey.
Joe, I'm not going to read it just because I'm doing this on my iPhone and it's very small.
Oh.
So I'm using the book. So I'm going to give someone else a chance.
Okay. Can anybody with it? I just can't see all the names on the screen. But the first words here.
Different.
I couldn't hear.
I have 1917 JPS.
Okay, perfect.
Difference. Okay, so
let's hear what we got.
Well, and it shall come to pass because ye hearken to these ordinances and
perfect
and do them.
Yeah, just that part. It'll come to pass because that's one word that is left out of this translation. It's not the only way of translating this word. The name of this Torah portion is Akev. And that's the word, interestingly, that's not being translated in this version of Sepharia. There is much debate over what the word means, but many do come down on the side of as a consequence of, or because of. Okay? And it's connected with the previous reading that we had. And it's speaking here about the reward of observance, the blessing and the benefit of living a life of holy observance. Then does anybody else have anything besides the word to hearken or listen? Does anybody have anything else besides hearken or observe in that first? It will be because or if you hearken, listen. Okay. Well, what I want to focus on is it says it will be because you listen. The word there, tishma'un, is like shma. It means to listen. It means to listen. And this section...
I wanted to ask you a quick question. So Ekev, it says, is like the word meaning heel, like Yaakov, right? They're the same shoresh?
That's absolutely, yes, and Rashi brings that down. That's one basic sense of the word, and then he gives a midrashic interpretation, a poetic interpretation. It does mean that, but it doesn't, what does that mean? It will be a heel if you listen. So we have to, Rashi drushes it out with the midrash, yes, but it is absolutely the same word there as far as root, not meaning, but root. And again, I can't see anybody's faces anymore because of the screen. So just speak up. But this is speaking, the passage begins, if you will listen. That's the simple translation. The word obey is a legitimate translation because in Hebrew, sometimes the word listen also means to obey or to observe more, accurately. And if you go also, if you could put this up again, Sherry, just for a little context, if you could put it to chapter 8, verse 20. 8, verse 20. So you can probably just scroll down. You're going to see something very interesting because we just said, V'haya ekev tishma'un. There we are. I want you to look at verse 20. The last, let's see, from the end of the verse in Hebrew, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6
As
words. It's that
Akev
same
lo
Hebrew word,
sishma'un.
Ekev lo sishma'un. So this unit is framed by V'haya Ekev Tishma'un. It will be because or on account of your listening, your observance, and yet this section ends with the term because, and look at the Hebrew there, they do it, because you did not heed or listen to the voice of the Lord your God. We have a framed unit here of the same language, because you listen, because you didn't listen or hear. Okay, it's the same root as the word Shema. Tishma'un is Shema, like we have Shema Yisrael. Hear, listen. So can you put the screen, just make it small, Sherry, for a second so I can see people's faces before I go in and develop this a little bit? Okay, so does everybody understand before we go, this Parsha, the section that I'm going to highlight, I'm not going to give you all the details of the Parsha, you can read it. I want to focus on this chapter, the chapter section that we're studying here begins with, if you will listen. And this unit begins with, but you didn't listen. You didn't hear. Everybody sees the frame, right? The same language. Because you will, it will be because you will listen and hear. And then it's because you didn't listen and hear. The same language. And this word because, akev, is not a common word in the Hebrew Bible. It's just not. So there's no way that this is, again, accidental, that we have two words framing a unit in this section that speaks about because you listened and because you didn't. Okay, so the focus here that we just had in our previous section was, there's a person who is broken. Their heart needs healing. Their lives have been broken. They're hurting. They've lost something sacred and holy. In the Jewish context, it was originally the temple. But now we're making this intimate. And it's my own heart that is broken, something in life. And as John said, how do we do it? How do we do it? This takes skill. Yes. The first thing it takes is presence of heart, so that we can speak to the heart. Remember, the language of Isaiah was, comfort my people. Speak to the heart was the next part of it in the next Haftorah. Okay, so we have to speak to the heart. In this language, I mean, this is what Isaiah is speaking of. Speaking to the heart. Question I want to ask us and focus us on right now is, why don't we? Why don't we? And I think one reason is because of where this little section that we just read in Deuteronomy 8 leads us. Ekev lo yishma'un. Because we don't listen. We are told repeatedly to listen, to hear, but we don't. And what's fascinating is this Hebrew word for listen in this context, in Deuteronomy 8:20, because they didn't listen, and at the beginning of the Torah portion, it will be because you will listen, will hear. What's fascinating is in the Targum, which is the ancient Aramaic. I'm going to make this as simple as I can, but it's critical. The Targum normally translates the word hear in Hebrew with the equivalent word in Aramaic, Shema, because it's basically the same, Shema and Shema. But there are several occasions where it doesn't. And these are two of them. It does not translate the word, it will be because you hear or listen. It doesn't translate it with Shema, which means to hear. The Targum translates it with the root word of to accept and to receive. And this gives us such a, first of all, it's a, if as we will see, this should be something very painful. because so often I hear things. Shema means to hear. It can also mean to listen. Okay, we have different words in English. In Hebrew, we don't. Shema has many meanings. That the Targum translates in Aramaic, not with Shema, hear, but with the root of kabal, which is to accept and to receive, is telling us something about how we often hear, which is we don't receive. I hear it with my ears. I got the sound waves that were transferred and my mind decoded them, and that was the end. But when we are speaking here in this context, in this time period that we're in the Jewish calendar of brokenness and loss and now rebuilding, and again, when we're speaking in our own lives of our own brokenness and loss and how we can help rebuild ourselves and each other, the first thing that we have to realize is how often we simply hear the words. It's auditory, but we're not receiving the words of the other person. We're not receiving them. We're not accepting them. Sometimes in the Aramaic, the Hebrew, I mean, when it uses the word to take, it uses this same word in Aramaic of to receive, to take, to accept. So this word is so relevant for us when we are seeking to rebuild in life. And we have to ask ourselves, if nothing is being rebuilt, the question is, am I hearing only, or am I accepting and receiving the wisdom, John, that we were speaking of? We need to offer wisdom to the heart. The wisdom from my heart to your heart to help heal your broken heart. If I only hear your pain, John, or AC, or Yashim, or Joe, well, I guess I wouldn't be talking to myself. But if I'm only hearing your pain with my ears, the sound waves, but I'm not receiving them, and my heart isn't touched and broken, then I'm not going to be able to offer you that heart-healing wisdom of presence. Then I'm not going to be speaking to the heart, like the language said, Dabru, Alev Yerushalayim, speak to the heart. If I'm only hearing with my mind and ears, but not accepting and receiving and taking them into my heart, your holy broken words, then I won't be able to speak from my heart to your broken heart, so that we can share in that brokenness together with heart and heartful presence. We don't do it. We don't. And again, I'm just looking at time here. I don't want to leave us hopeless. This is not meant to be, oh my goodness, we're such a bunch of miserable wretches. The reason the Torah and the Targum, which is considered, when this Aramaic, who cares what the Aramaic says? The rabbis explain that the Targum Onkelos is not simply an Aramaic translation. It is almost on par, according to some rabbis, with Sinai. It is telling you the inner dimension for the locals who didn't speak Hebrew. It was translated into the vernacular so they could have the inner sense of what it meant. Onkelos is a highly regarded commentary and explanation. And in this case, at this time, in this broken world, we need to do more than tishma'un, hear, or shma. We need to learn to transform our hearing into receiving and accepting, taking these words in. That's why in this context, in this little unit that we have, the 2 times that it mentions hearing, it translates it with receiving and accepting. And so the question is, why don't I? Why don't I? Why am I so often numb or unwilling that I won't hear another person beyond the sound waves? So if we could go, Sherry, to Deuteronomy 9, It says it twice also in this parsha. It says it several times in the Bible, but it's twice in this parsha. Let's go to 9, verse 6. Chapter 9, verse 6 in Deuteronomy. And if somebody, let's see, what do they got here in the English? Let me see. Okay, great. Would somebody, anybody, I just can't see most. How about Michael? Michael Atkins, you want to read this for us? 9, verse 6 from the screen. It's a fine translation.
Know then that it is not for any virtue of yours that your God Yahweh is giving you this good land to possess, for you are a stiff-necked people.
Okay, that's the phrase I want to focus on. Kiam kshe oidef ata. This is emphatic. This that word you. Put it this way. If I were going to say it the way it's written in an email, I would capitalize you. Or if I were speaking to you, I would be yelling, you. This is highlighting you. Not them, you back then, but you and me right now. And what does it mean, a stiff-necked people? And what does that mean? I slept wrong and I can't. Sorry, folks, I got a stiff neck. This is not talking about whether your neck has a kink in it. Okay, this phrase is used several times, and again, because of time, we're not going to go through it.
Joe?
It begins in Exodus. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
I can't see your hand, Sarah.
No,
So
no,
I'm
no.
sorry. I just can't see anything.
Because there are three of us Zooming, I figured it will help the video for you if I'm not videotaping on video as well. But I wanted to say reading this line, it's the first time that I actually thought, well, this is a Jewish concept of the Christian concept of grace, meaning when it's used in a not, you don't deserve. This
Okay.
is just
Okay.
done purely grace, because this verse that's saying that, no, this is not, you're not, this is not being brought to you or given to you because you're such great people.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, either you're a prophetess, but what I was going to develop this for a moment. Again, this is an entire study, and I've probably
Ooh,
already
I'm a
gone in the
prophetess. I like
weeds.
that.
Well, you're a prophet named Tess. I don't know. What I was going to do was explain this a little more, because again, it doesn't mean that I slept wrong last night, and I can't turn my neck. I want you to look at one of the first uses in Exodus. We don't have to go to it. I'm just going to read it to you, but it's the reason that you brought up grace, or this is Jewish grace, which certainly is what we call Christian grace. It's very often rooted in Jewish grace, but we all have grace. But often Judaism is thought of as graceless in some circles. But if we go to Exodus 32, remember earlier in our study when I was asking you about the number 13, and Yael said the 13 attributes of God? And that's what we say on Yom Kippur, and we say it on a fast day. The Lord, right? Adonai, Adonai, El Racham v'chanun erech v'payim v'rav chesed v'emes. So the Lord, God, merciful and compassionate, right? That's Exodus 32. Okay, that's Exodus 32, verses 6. Let's see here where we are. Exodus 32, 34. Sorry, that's 34. 34, man. 34, not 32. It's in 34, verse 6. Okay, and it goes on, verse 6 and verse 7. Do you know what verse 9? So that's the statement of God's enduring mercy, forgiveness, kindness. That's Exodus 34, verses 6 and 7. Do you know what verse 9 then speaks of? Right after God's mercy and forgiveness and kindness, Verse 9, it speaks of we are stiff-necked. So it's juxtaposing again this idea of grace and forgiveness and compassion and mercy and stiff-neckedness, as we would say, I guess, that we are stiff-necked. These two are often paralleled, okay? And it is something very intentional. And the question for us that I want to ask us, and then we'll say one more thing and conclude, is when we find that somebody is, and we'll describe this in more in a moment, but stiff-necked. In one sense, that means just obstinate and rebellious. How do we usually respond? If we could take down, I don't need the screen anymore, Sherry. When we encounter an unpleasant person, okay, call them stiff-necked and all the beautiful incarnations that can manifest itself as. When we encounter a miserable person, a difficult person, is our response graceful? Well, often this phrase, am kshe oref, ata, you're stiff-necked, is often found in contexts that precede or follow mercy. And so the question is, are we following that structure? That's the verses in the text, but those verses are there to guide us, that we have the potential to be more merciful and more compassionate and more forgiving when we are experiencing someone who is am kshe oref, but we usually don't. So the question is, why again? Why don't we? And I'll give you my answer, but I just want to ask up front, why don't we often try to come from that place in the presence of a stiff-necked person, a difficult person? Why is our response usually to make our own neck stiffer or our own personalities stiffer in response rather than sharing some mercy or forgiveness or kindness or grace, since they are often near each other in the biblical texts as a model for us to live? Why don't we? Why don't we?
I would say in part it stems from a lack of humility. That's a quality that we're often not encouraged in, that our time is precious and God forbid someone should impose upon it with their stiff-neckedness and force us to tolerate their behavior because, we're beyond that.
Okay, so I've heard, I get, yes. Now I know that, AC. And I'm still going to respond with a stiffer neck when somebody else responds to me in a way that isn't ideal. You just told me, and I know. How come I'm still not, now that I know I should have some more humility along with a few other traits, how come now that I know that I'm still not softening my neck, softening my response, softening my person, whether it's through humility or through compassion or through mercy or through love? Now I know, but now what?
Maybe it goes back to that part where you were talking about listening with your heart.
Thank you. Amen. That's exactly where we were going. This was Ann Job.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, no, I just wanted to make sure I know who was speaking. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Do you want to say more? Fill us in?
I mean, in the Christian tradition, we talk about this all the time. It's just a hard thing. You know what I mean? Like you can know it and you still can't do it.
Yes. And the question, that's why I focused on the word Shema. This little unit that we have is framed with the same language of Akev and Tishma'un, because you listened, or because you heard. And again, that's the same word as Shema Yisrael, hear, hear. It begins with because you heard, and it ends with because you didn't hear. And again, the Targum, the Aramaic translation, doesn't say because you heard Shema. It says because you received. But in the end, it says because you didn't receive. This is sort of the paradigm for life that I am trying to see my life through. Am I not just hearing Shema, but am I receiving your words? In our context, the words of a person in pain, the words of a person whose heart or life is broken. Am I hearing those words? And it's because you heard. That's the verse that Deuteronomy 7:12 begins. It will be because you heard. You know what that word, AJ? You know what another word for the word because? It will be because, Akev. Do you know what else it means in addition to relating to heal? It also means reward. The reward, the blessing, the gift will be when you hear. Tishma'un, but only if you hear in the way that the Targum is explaining its deeper meaning, which is receiving the words that are being offered, not just hearing them with your ears, but accepting them and receiving them into your heart. And if we don't, then we're, 5 seconds, yell, yes. If we lo tishma'un, akev lo tishma'un, if we don't receive the words we're hearing, or more broadly, if we're not receiving another person's pain or presence, then we're not going to get the quote reward. The reward isn't here. It's a heavenly reward. It's the reward of holy connection, of holy healing. Folks, the reason that Shema, hearing, is so important is because we don't hear. Half the time we don't hear because we're just not present. But sometimes we can be here with each other. And I heard every word, but I'm not receiving them within. So I'm not truly hearing you. When we say I hear you in English, that means I hear you and I'm feeling and I'm receiving your words. And so we're often stiff-necked. I'm not willing to turn my neck to you and listen to you. Like you said, AJ, I got too many other things going on. So I can't receive your words. I can hear the sound, but I can't receive them because I got a stiff neck because I'm not turning toward your struggle. Your brokenness, I'm sorry, but I got other things. And the call of the holy is Shema. That's the first prayer a Jew learns, the Shema, to hear. And it's the last prayer a Jew says on his lips or her lips, if they can, before they die, which is to hear. The call is to hear, but to hear in a way that the Targum, Unkelos, is explaining, which is to hear in a way that we receive so that we can receive each other. We can receive each other. And that begins with turning your neck to listen, to face them, to see them, to be present with them in their pain. And hopefully they will be present with us in our pain. That's my prayer for us, that we hear. And it will be if we hear each other. V'haya eikav tishma'un. It will be if we begin to hear and listen and accept each other's words and pain and beauty and glory, that we may actually bring some glory to this world. If we learn how to listen to each other and stretch our necks, open ourselves up to being present for each other. Yael, you had a statement, then I'll let anybody else who wants to offer some closing words do so. That'll be our study for today. But yes, Yael.
Well, before I offer anything. I noticed, and maybe it was just because of the way your screen is configured, but I noticed that Yeshem had her hand
Oh,
raised a couple of times, so I just wanted
I
to
am
give
so
her the
sorry. I
No,
opportunity.
didn't
it's
see it.
okay. It's okay.
I am so sorry. I got lost. I'm sorry. I didn't turn my neck the right way.
This is what I was thinking, and I just wanted to offer it. When you were talking about people who've been traumatized and people who have been hurt and how we can listen to heal. So this is the line of the sort of my ideas, the line of thought here.
Mhm.
When people are traumatized, they are in a position of feeling very well, they're in the present. Trauma does that to you.
Mhm.
They're in the present, and all relationships are pretty much about here, survival, and most relationships are transactional.
Mhm.
And you feel bad about, what you can or cannot offer at this time, when you're in a state of grieving or loss, or, you're broken. Whereas communication, to really understand somebody, we have to change frequency and go into that level of unconditional love, and to understand that there is unconditional love present even in our everyday relationships. So we can sort of listen to that frequency of unconditional love and sort of establish our position in terms of where we stand in God's love. It's easier to reach out to somebody who is still stuck on that transactional hurt level, and then we can begin to heal and hear each other, because we're getting our energy from the higher source, from God. And that is a different frequency to engage with somebody. So I think when I think about it, I think of the neckedness as just forgetting that not all human relationships are transactional. It's like not hearing the invitation to change frequency is how I see what this stiff-neckedness is about. And the other thing is, I mean, these verses were written when Jews were really highly traumatized. So they're not switching into an easy acceptance of God's, presence and healing and that unconditional love. There's still a lot of elements of how are we going to survive? How are we going to get ahead? When you've been hurt so long, it's very hard to make that switch. And that healing is in hearing more and more and more. So we get to connect with God's, divine power and love. And that's how I see it. Is that that was my line
No,
of thought.
thank you. And look, that's your language of transactional. I said functional. We functionally
Yeah.
hear. We hear the functional waves. But that's not what Shema, according to Unkelos, is.
Yes.
It's Kabal. It's that root of Kabal, which is receiving the words. But it starts with us, though. That's why the beautiful phrase that we said from Isaiah 40 about comfort, it then says, speak to the heart. But you can't speak to the heart if you're not coming from the heart. It always
That's right.
starts with us. You're right, Yashin. And we don't. And it's because we don't turn. Well, we do turn. We just turn away. And we lock our position there. We can turn back. We can absolutely turn back. And we can, and we can. And then, yes, I see Ann Job.
I think it's Neil.
Yeah,
Think
Neil
what?
has
Oh, I'm
Neil has
sorry. I'm
hand up.
sorry. Yes, Neil.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm traveling now. I just pulled over. I'm wondering if this also refers to when a person's like excessively focused on doing something, whether it's work, prayer, play, reading, whatever it is. When you're really focused, you let the sounds around you basically go in one ear out the other, and you don't listen. You hear them, but you don't listen to them per se, until such a point that sound gets important enough? Is that train in the distance, or is it, coming at you? Is that person, I'll just say it, and I don't mean any disrespect, is that person really whining, or is that person grieving? Does that person really need help, or is he just looking for conversation? And sometimes when you're really focused on something, you're happy to have a conversation as soon as you're kind of done doing what you're focused on. But if someone's really hurting and grieving, I think that most of us would just drop anything we're doing and be there with that person. I don't know. Just
No,
thought.
yes. And I think what this is calling us to, this idea of hearing, not just hearing auditory, but hearing in a way that allows us to receive. I think this is actually the call of the sacred, to hear in a way that we receive. But we have to be present, and we have to be present with heart. And I hope we can speak to the heart and also listen to the heart and listen from the heart, so that we can fill each other's broken hearts with each other's presence more fully. And so, yes, Neil, perfect. Thank you. And then Yael, you had one, or
Yeah, I thought just
or
before when you were mentioning, when AJ mentioned the Akev and Yaakov and how we have that simple translation, right, of the humility, I thought because you mentioned how the Shema was also the key bell, the receiving, and I thought that it tied in perfectly because if we hear, if we listen with our heart, then we will also receive some of that humility that we need. And I thought it was a very nice way to tie all of
yes,
those thoughts in
yeah,
together.
we will, yes, receiving is the key. We will receive everything, each other, and all of the wonderful traits that we are seeking to cultivate that could heal not all loss in life, but we can help heal the brokenness of the hearts that are always going to be broken. But there will be some healing and wholeness in there if we go beyond hearing into receiving. And we can. I mean, John, you said it, it's so hard, and we can't. Several, if you said it, it's so hard. A few of you said it. And I will simply, if does anybody else have any other closing words, and I'll leave us with one sentence to guide us for the rest of the week.
I've got something. I started a new journal recently
Yes,
while I was
Christo.
traveling. I started a new journal while I was traveling out in Pittsburgh for a few weeks. And one of the first entries I put in it, it's here in the chat. I wrote the two English words, listen and silent, are both spelled with all the same letters, probably for a very good reason. Now, me personally, I have really bad ADHD. If my mouth's open, my ears are forced shut. So if I'm quiet for a long time, I'm trying to keep my ears open.
Well, thank you. And I'm sorry, yes.
Just a quick thought. So I do centering prayer every morning with my we're basically Catholic group. And we always start with this little the person always says the same thing every time. And one of the things they say is to listen with the ears of our heart. Listen with the ears of our heart.
Yes. Yeah, that's actually it's a famous it's a famous ancient, I mean, it's not only, but you're Catholic, you're a Thomist Catholic, right?
Yes.
Yes, that's rooted very deeply in the Catholic tradition. Very deeply. And I'm sure we all know that the word heart has the word ear in it, just to play up on Christo's silent and listen. The problem is we don't listen with our heart. We listen with our ears. And the rabbis teach about the ears, folks. I'll leave you with this. The rabbis teach that the ears are the gateway to the mind. That's necessary. We have to instruct the mind. The ears are the gateway to the mind, but they are also the door to the heart. And the problem in life is often we have this door to the heart closed. so that what we hear simply instructs and informs our mind. We have to hear with heart and mind, and with mind and heart. And we think it's so difficult and that we can't. And simply, yes, it's taking it in a different context, but it's in the grand context ultimately in Deuteronomy 30, when it in Parshas Nitzavim, when it says about this commandment. Say it's this commandment specifically, but the rabbis often take it means all commandments. This commandment that I am commanding you today, it is not too wondrous or difficult for you. Mimcha. And it's not too distant or far from you. It speaks of it being in your mouth and in your heart to do. Notice the word heart. Connect with heart and mind. Serve with heart and mind. Listen in such a way that will allow your mind to be informed and enlightened, but also keep those doors open of the heart so that your heart can receive that holy wisdom and be touched. And that, I promise you, if you listen like that, that's listening and receiving, that will allow your neck to be a little less stiff so you can focus not on just what's before you and what you need, but on somebody else over there who might need your presence. Yael, I leave us with Yael.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint, but I noticed that Sherry also had her hand raised, and I wanted you to be able to hear
Sorry.
her.
I just got to start
okay.
looking at the screen. I apologize. All your glorious faces, I get lost in my thoughts, and now I see Anne. So you go, Yael, then Sherry, then Anne.
Oh,
I didn't have
think
anything to
Al was
offer. I just wanted to let you know that Sherry did.
Oh, thank you. Thank
means
you.
half
Yeah,
an
you're gonna be
hour.
my notifier, Yael.
Okay.
I gotta focus on the screen.
No, that's okay. And I don't want to take a lot of time, but you know, just hearing the discussion, I guess a couple thoughts came up. You know, one was how do I say this? Like I had to learn how to listen. Like that's not what I grew up with. You know, I grew up with a wonderful, amazing Jewish mother who wanted to fix everything. And listening wasn't really in the skill set. I didn't learn that. And, you know, with my own kids, that was a real deficiency. Like I really had to learn how important it was to actually really listen without trying to fix anything, just listen. That's what they needed. They needed to be heard. And I've just learned how important that is for people. People need to be heard and accepted. And then the other part that I was thinking was, you know, over the years, I've just learned how important that word acceptance is. Real acceptance. And we cannot have any peace as human beings without acceptance. That's what I've come to feel anyway.
Yes. Amen. And I hear you. And I'm intentionally playing on that. The word hear and the word accept or receive, the same, the Hebrew Aramaic. That is the way that we are ultimately going to come together. Not because we agree. I simply hear what you're saying. I accept you might have a different approach. And we're going to have to do that because otherwise it ain't going to work. And it starts with us. I know it's always the other clown, but if only they, but if only I, that's all I can do. And I am hearing you, and I'm trying to hear in a way that allows me to receive and become more because I heard you. And that's why I always want to hear more about you so I know who you are, so I can hear who you are and learn more than just here's what you said, but I can learn to understand more about who you are. And Anne, and yes, Yan,
I
yes.
didn't actually have my hand up, but I did think about Sherry's point too. Thank you for sharing that. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yes, Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for being here.
Shabbat Shalom. Yeah, I hope this was something that we can all live with. You know, the word to hear in Hebrew also means to observe. It's like doing. I hope we do more than simply hear and have our hearts touched. I hope we begin to live and to do some of the beautiful wisdom, this beautiful wisdom that we're hearing about and hopefully accepting. And I hope you turn to somebody else this week. And I actually hope you turn back to yourself. Good Shabbos, everybody. Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. See y'all next time, I hope.
Shabbat
Call
Shalom,
me.
everyone.
Thank you,
You need me,
Rabbi.
call me. Get my number from Sherry.
Rabbi, thank you
Oh, thank you.
for
Oh,
leading this
thank you.
session. Thank you for being here, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joan, I'm
Thank you
glad you
all.
made it on.
2 minute break.